Hello, my friend. This is the Mind's Gym podcast with Brandon Bickmore, your turbo lover. I want to sincerely thank you for listening. And the reason I started this podcast was to give back and let you know that if you are struggling with your thoughts and mental health, I promise you there is a way out, and that would be in, if you're willing to do the work. Please enjoy this episode. Hey guys, it's Brandon Bickmore, your turbo lover. How's everyone today? It's April 21st, about 3 p.m. It's a Sunday. And sitting down with a gentleman, young man that I met about probably 5 or 6 years ago. This is going to be a fascinating listen. Andrew Ream, he was a member of the FLDS Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which is the Warren Jeffs portion of the fundamental polygamy religion that was in Colorado City, which is in Arizona, which is on the border of like kind of St. George, Utah, and Colorado City's actually in Arizona. My mom and I and my brother Chase, we went down and met Andrew 4 or 5 years ago and walked through the town of Colorado City. He walked us around, showed us the store, showed us the church, the temple, I guess, Warren Jeff's compound, all sorts of stuff, and really educated us on what takes place down there. And previous to that, I had a friend recommend that Andrew come up and help me. I was remodeling some condos in downtown Salt Lake City. It was probably back in 2017, 18-ish. And Andrew's such a handy individual because he was brought up framing and in construction, and basically is one of the most talented human beings I've ever met, and likely the hardest worker I've ever met. And ever since I started this podcast, he's always been in the back of my mind. But he is a busy guy. He has a child that's 3 years old that's bedridden, which we'll talk about. He did leave the FLDS church when he was 21 years old. Currently, he's 35 years young, and he's just got an incredible life story. I know a lot about this guy because he worked for me for a year and a half. But boy, I'm just so excited to have him on and allow you listeners to hear another story about polygamy, but also a different one from the young gal that I interviewed 3 months ago. Was from the Kingston clan. We'll kind of see if there's any similarities there, but just so excited to be able to talk to Andrew. He drove up last night from Colorado City and stayed the night with me, and then we got up early this morning, went on a bike ride up at Corner Canyon. I don't think Andrew gets to do a lot of exciting and fun, adventurous stuff, so I thought it'd be fun to take him on a bike ride. And so a couple of my brothers, Jason Barry and I, and my buddy David, went for a good 2-3 hour ride this morning and rode some mountain bikes, some e-bikes, and my brother Barry has 2, so we had an extra bike for Andrew, and we sure had a good time up there. And it was fun to watch him kind of ride around and do his thing, and then how fascinated he was with all the greenery that was up there. Today it's obviously spring, and all the weeds and the plants and that are growing, all this different flowers. And when we got done, he was explaining to me that his dad had taught him kind of a lot of survival skills and what plants you can eat. So he is able to decipher which plant's healthy, which plant's unhealthy, which ones you can eat, which ones are beneficial, which ones are poisonous. So this young man has quite a background and a fascinating upbringing, And just my curiosity when I hang out with this guy is through the roof. I always have so many questions for him. And I'm wondering if his upbringing, his education, which he didn't go to school, he was homeschooled by his father. I'm wondering, if that was beneficial, if it was not great. And in my mind, and we'll let you guys all decide, I think that however you're brought up is how you were supposed to be brought up. And then we're obviously going to discuss all sorts of stuff, but why he left the religion and where he met his wife. She was also part of the religion too. I think they met when they were 18, and I don't know, just fascinating lives that we endure here. And this young man's got quite a story. So here we go. And by the way, if you guys would please leave us a wonderful review. Please tell all your friends. This podcast takes a lot of effort, and I really appreciate you guys all listening. Please share it with your friends. Please post some comments. Any feedback you'd have for me would be great. Often the feedback I get is, you need to get more excited and talk louder. Well, I'm just an individual that's so chill and laid back. I have a really hard time behaving inauthentically. So my quiet voice is just natural. So if you need to turn up your mic, or you got to push 1.5 and speed it up a little, because I am a slow talker, please feel free to do that. But and I also appreciate guys putting up with my slow speaking and my not so loudness. So anyways, thanks again for listening, guys, and I'm so excited to have Andrew on, and this courageous and willing and fearless young man. You guys are going to learn a lot today, so let's rock and roll. How are you today, Andrew?
Good. How are you, Brandon?
Good. Appreciate you being on. So where do we start? Your story is fascinating.
Well, I think we should start with a little bit of, where I was born.
Yeah.
A little bit of my younger years and what it was like to grow up in Colorado City, Arizona.
Yeah.
And a little bit of my upbringing and past history with, my parents and some of the church history that went along there that happened while I was growing up.
Let's hear it. So let's start off. What's your first memories at Colorado City? How old were you when you some of your first memories and
so
what
I
were you
have.
doing? When did you move to Colorado City? Maybe there's a better question. Because were you somewhere else before Colorado City?
Yes.
Where?
I was actually originally born here in Sandy, Utah. My parents were also born here in Salt Lake Valley. I also have I have two sisters that were born here too. And then I moved to Colorado City, Arizona with my dad when I was 8 years old. Because I remember this very well because I got baptized into the religion right after we moved down.
Nice. So 8 years old.
8 years old.
Similar to the Mormon religion.
Very similar.
Okay. So 8 years old is the sweet spot to get baptized.
That's when they taught us as young children that we had to remember our articles of faith and 10 Commandments by memory before we could get baptized into the church. And then when they baptize us, it's obviously kind of the same similar thing. They take you into a big pool of water. You're dressed in white from top to bottom. They have a priesthood head bearer say his ritual and blessing and then dunk you under the water for a couple seconds, and then you pop back up and you go get changed out of your wet clothes, and you wonder if you're a better person at the end of the day.
All your sins just washed away, didn't they?
Well, I guess at 8 years old, you ain't got a lot of them, so that's it was very confusing as a child. I think the biggest thing in that picture that I remember was the rush of diving into the pool. of water.
Yeah.
Because I just wanted to get in the water.
Yeah.
I didn't really realize what the blessing was or the baptism. All I wanted was just to get into the pool of water, which everybody else was getting into at that young age, and be a part of what was going on.
Were you able to you probably no swimming pools or anything in Colorado City?
No.
And was that not okay either? Could you go swim or get in the water?
You could swim, but there's absolutely no clothes taken off whatsoever. So as we swam as kids, we had full long underwear garments, our jeans, and our button-up pullover shirts over us, and we swam in that.
So you were in the water completely with all your clothes on.
Yep. And
was that playing in the creek?
Yeah, that's playing in the creek and going up to the water canyon where there was, little tide pools and stuff from the stream that we played in.
I've noticed today a whole bunch you've mentioned the creek.
Mm-hmm.
So if you lived in Colorado City, I assume they called it the creek?
Yes.
Okay, why?
The reason being is before Colorado City was a city that came into fruition that used to be called Short Creek, Arizona. Mm-hmm. And that's what the town was known by before it was ever established a city to Colorado City, Arizona back in the late 1950s. Oh. Before then, it was called Short Creek, Arizona. And creek is a slang or a nickname for Colorado City, Arizona.
I didn't know that. You kept saying that today, and I wanted to ask you, why do you call it the creek? So it's creek.
Creek.
But you guys call it the creek.
Put a nice little southern twist on that.
Nice little twang on it. Okay, cool. So you got baptized at 8.
Correct.
And from there, what's your next plan of attack? So how does it work? You get baptized and then what?
The next plan of attack as a young man, you get to 12 and then you get the priesthood.
Okay.
And at that age, if you're worthy of the church and the blessing, you get ordained a deacon in the priesthood as a young man at 12 years old. And then later on, as you turn 18 or close to 18, and you've been a faithful follower and going into young adult male, you get ordained an elder. And then as soon as that took place, you were given a wife, property, and whatever else you needed to move and live on for in life to help the church or the community move along. And you were given those things, and you were taught that as well, that stuff was going to come to you, and that you didn't need to worry about where it was going to come from as far as, a young man building a family, getting a home, so forth. So that was my mindset, was as soon as you reach this certain age, you're going to have this if you're obedient. You do exactly, what you're supposed to be doing, what your dad's telling you to do, and you're an obedient, faithful follower. You will have this at this age.
Right. Wow, that's crazy. So then you live your life. You become very obedient because you want the wife, you want the property that they're promising you. Mm-hmm. So you got the wife, right?
No.
At 18, or you met?
No.
No, not yet.
No.
Too far ahead.
So
18 years old, you got your priesthood, or
18, I did not get my priesthood.
You didn't?
I did not.
Uh-oh.
So that came on a little bit later because I was a bad boy.
Really?
According to terms. So I went out at night with my friends. I got involved with, some alcohol as a younger adult, and that was shunned upon. Absolutely no alcohol. And then, of course, girls and stuff like that, women. That was definitely not.
Okay, so you're drinking at, what age did you start dabbling with alcohol?
Around 17, 18.
17.
Yeah.
And were you doing this in Colorado City at the creek, or are you running to St. George, you're going into Hurricane?
It was that. I got in with some friends, and peer pressure, we'd go to parties down to St. George or Hurricane, and we'd end up drinking a little, and then we'd end up climbing back our trucks and hauling ass back home before Dad could ever catch us or get wind that we were gone.
So were you with your polygamous friends?
Yes.
Or with some of the Gentiles or outsiders, you call them?
My my first party that I went to as a young man, I actually met up with some friends of mine that had left the religion, that were apostates. And so I wasn't supposed to be there at all to begin with, even associating with them, and I ended up drinking with them. And one thing led to another, that kind of just kept happening every so often. And then eventually my dad got wind of it, and kind of led to, okay, you can't be sitting around at home with your young teenage friends. We need to be getting you out to work with your uncles and getting you away from that environment, because you're not going to be a part of what's our religion or my household. You can't live in my house and be a part of my religious teachings and follow this system if you're going to be doing this.
Yeah. So you're out kind of partying, doing some drinking, hanging out with some girls, but most of those kids were originally from Colorado City.
Yes.
So none of these are like outsiders, random kid you met from St. George or Hurricane or anything like that.
Maybe a couple of them, that come into the party, but for the scene of the crowd, it was some of my old friends. And
had they left the religion, or were they just kind of out partying too? Just kind of dabbling and trying to figure life out?
They had left the religion, and some of the boys were younger than me, but it was like their older brother left, and then they kind of got sick of it, and then said, okay, I'm going to go leave and live with my older brother in St. George. Oh. So that's what a lot of younger boys started doing. If they had an uncle or something that left and they were being rebellious and they didn't want to conform to the ideas of the religion, they would just be like, okay, I'm going to go live with my brother or my uncle, and they'd get wrapped up in that crowd too, and scenes of drugs and alcohol.
So you were a little bit rebellious at 17 and 18 years old.
Very much so.
Dad got wind of it.
Yes.
And then now what's your...
Well, at that time, I was doing carpentry work, and I had been doing it for a few years. And I had gotten sick of doing that trade, and I wanted to try something different. So my dad and I came up with the agreement that I had a couple friends that had some uncles that were doing some concrete work up in Idaho, in northern Idaho, up above Salt Lake. And they're like, do you want to come help us try something different? I'm just like, yeah, well, if my dad says, yeah, I'll come up and help you. But I also understood it was an opportunity for me to leave town and go work out of town and get away from I just didn't want to be around my parents or my family or the religion anymore. I was a very upset and angry person as a young man. So I always had a chip on my shoulder with my dad had to tell me what to do and what not to do at that age when I was coming into the 18, 19-year-old phase of my life. And so I got permission from him, finally got him to say yes, that, okay, you can go up to northern Idaho to go do concrete. And once I left that, going to work and being back home every night to St. George and back home, once I got out of that scene and I was away from my family, my parents, my life that I'd known my whole life, then my eyes started really opening up to what the outside world was and what it had to offer. And my curiosity was just always peaking. Every day I'd go out on those jobs with just different types of people that weren't a part of the religion or raised from that area. It was very interesting to me to get into conversations with people and ask them, hey, is this normal? Is this weird to you guys that we do this? Is this... And a lot of people would just look at me and shake their head and be like, that's the craziest stuff I've ever heard. Yeah.
Well, so tell... I know a lot about your story, so I'm going to slow you down on a few things. So real quick, so you are instructed and taught and brought up to not talk to people outside of the religion, outside of the fold, right?
Correct.
And if you talk to, let's get our verbiage proper here, a Gentile. So I would be considered a Gentile because I'm not part of the FLDS religion.
Correct.
Right? And I'm outside of it. And then there's such thing as an apostate. And an apostate is somebody that's been in the FLDS religion that's left,
Correct.
right? And
Yes.
if you talk to an apostate as an FLDS member, that's just as bad as, like, you might as well just consider going to hell.
Yeah, you might
That's
as well.
right?
Yes, you might as well leave yourself, because you've talking and associating with that person, you forfeit all blessings in heaven and on earth, because you're associating with a cast out,
Right.
or a black sheep, to say, of their agenda and their religious ideas and purposes.
Okay. So what if I do this a lot, so I'm wondering if I've gotten anybody in trouble over my 20 years in the construction. Oftentimes, and even if I'm on vacation and I can tell by a particular outfit that some polygamists wear, right? The long pants, long sleeves, long dresses, and the ladies' hairs are usually, ladies' hairdos are a certain way up in a bun or whatever. So if I talk to them, is that okay if I'm just a Gentile because I haven't been a part of your flock? Like if I just say, hey, how are you, young lady? And what are you doing today? Because I talk to everybody I run into. Is she going to be in trouble because I said hi and she actually had a conversation with me for 1 minute?
Most likely not, because you had never had any knowledge of that religion, or you were never a part of it. So she's not sinning, or he's not sinning by talking to you or communicating, because they don't know that you were ever a part of it or had anything to do with it. So there's no bad into talking about it.
So you can talk to Gentiles, but if you talk to an apostate like you, which we'll get into, you've left the religion 15 years ago, and now your mom and dad don't speak with you, which we're going to touch base on that. But they can't talk to you, because if they do, they're going to lose all their blessings here on earth and likely forfeit going to heaven.
Yes.
If they have a conversation with you.
Yes, they give up the opportunity to have any blessings received on this earth after they pass away, and they think that it's also, if you talk to a son of perdition or apostate, you also forfeit all your celestial blessings in the next life after this. Like, you have no chance to get the celestial kingdom or have any of those blessings even offered to you.
Right.
Because you made that decision.
Because you communicated with an apostate.
Yep.
Crazy.
Absolutely wild.
What happened to unconditional love? Just throw them out the window in that religion,
literally,
or what?
that's what happened. Is people started throwing love out the window for an idea that they were going to get blessings in the afterlife.
Wow, that's so crazy.
So they were willing to put anything in this life in front of that.
Jeez Louise. Okay, so that was a little sidetrack there, just to make sure the listeners are clear on what an apostate is and what a Gentile is, or an outsider. I'm considered like an outsider, right?
Yes.
/ Gentile.
Yes.
Okay. So tell us, I want to hear a little bit about where, like, working. So I know you went to Idaho. That's kind of where we dropped off. You went to Idaho. You wanted to see another part of the world other than Colorado City, and your eyes kind of opened up a little bit. But I want to backtrack just a little bit, and then we'll come back to Idaho.
Okay.
I want you to tell me, what age were you when you started working and actually put on a tool belt?
Okay.
Before we get to the Idaho.
Okay. So at the age of 14.
14.
This would have been, age 14.
Okay.
I just turned 14. I had been a little bit of a rebellious teenager up to that point, young teenager. Kind of a wild child, to say. My dad and mom really didn't know how to handle me that well, and I had a lot of energy and was just everywhere. And mostly just bored. Needed something to do. So my mom got a hold of her sister, that she has a bunch of her boys own a framing company called Paragon Contractors. And I went to work up in South Zions building cabins and put on a tool belt at the age of 14 years old and started cutting boards for all my uncles and hauling nails and doing cleanup. And as soon as I was able to understand a tape measure, they made me start cutting boards and pretty much, putting on a man's labor at the age of 16, 17 years old. I was hauling a payload of, and, any average man out there
Right.
working a construction job.
Yep.
Didn't get paid for any of this. Of course, it was all child labor. Paragon's been sued for that and went through the courts and everything.
Yeah.
But I think the idea of my background of how I had to put on a tool belt at such a young age, there was two options. I could either stay home and be with my mom and do the house chores and be mom's boy at home, or I could go be a man and go work with my uncles or my dad out in the field.
Right.
So that was the choice at a really young age, whether I had option A or B.
So you're 14.
14.
And does dad come to you and say, hey, here's your option? 14, you go to work, put on a tool belt, or stay home with mom. But if you stayed home with mom, you've told me this in the past, the idea was clean the house.
Yes.
Make lunch, make breakfast, have dinner ready when all the employees and workers get home, clean the house, vacuum, whatever needs to be done. So you're home working in the house from 8 to 5. Was there any free time there? What about 8 to 14? Were you working around the house when you were 8 years old? You working in the garden?
Yes.
What were you doing from 8 to 14?
8 to 14, that was definitely the role of a young country boy. We had gardens, we had dairies, we had orchards, and we were also the polygamous community group. So we did harvest every year. There was community efforts to put away food. There's community efforts to keep the dairy going. There's community efforts to do cleanup and weed around the town. So as a young man, we had this force called the work crew force, where all us boys every summer, all these moms didn't know what to do with all these boys. They'd send us to the meeting house, and we'd have a man by name of Alvin Bartle. He would direct us all as young men, and he had a trailer full of shovels, rakes, hoes, and picks, and he'd send us all out there to weed the town. So every year, the town got weeded.
The whole town?
The whole town.
All the yards?
Every street, every yard, everything. Every year.
And that was from kind of 8 to 14-ish?
Yeah, that was kind of my childhood upbringing, yeah.
Yeah, so you're out weeding, cleaning this, working in the dairy, working at the slaughterhouse, you told me earlier today.
Yes, I had opportunities to clean up animals at the slaughter locations.
Did you do that as a young age or later?
No, young, very young.
Very young.
Yeah, all us dads were teaching us basic skills of life and how to clean up an animal correctly and how to grow a garden and what plants to plant through the area, and basically what it need to be to self-sustain if you were to teach younger generation that this is the way of life and this is the way we live and this is the only way we get our food and water and our meat is we have to do this. Yeah. So we were pretty much very self-sustained that way. We did harvest every year, which the big one was a corn harvest and potato harvest, where the communities of people by the thousands would get together and shuck corn off the cob, wash potatoes, sort them, can them, bottle them, you name it, from preserving it almost every way you can think of. And then after corn harvest, this happened every year. So after corn harvest, then there's fruit harvest when it comes later on in the year. Then you got all the peaches and all the fruits and grapes. And
you guys bottling?
Bottled, yes. We did everything for the storehouse. And then as you needed food, you went up to the storehouse and got your allotted amount for your family, the portions you needed, and you took it home, and that's what you got. You filled out a little sheet. Your mom or your grandma went up there every week, and they filled out a little sheet for what they needed, and the storehouse person would give them that lot, and they'd go home, just like a grocery store.
Yep, so the storehouse is a grocery store,
yes.
Essentially.
Yes.
And you guys are stocking it, filling it up, blah, blah, blah. All right, so back to the corn and peach harvest. We little audio difficulties. We're getting a little bit of a static there, so follow up on that. So you're
okay.
The storehouse / peach corn harvest.
So
That was your job as a child and everybody else in the neighborhood.
yeah, that was the majority of my roll call of what chores I had to do growing up. Was just a lot of farm. You could just say basic ranch farm work. It was, you grew your crops, put them away, and you enjoyed the fruits of your harvest later when you went to had to get, go to the storehouse to go grocery shopping. Pretty much that was your food.
And everybody ate from the storehouse, correct?
Everybody that had a very firm following and believing in the religion, yes. My grandfather never had a paying job. Neither did my grandmother's. And they lived solely off the storehouse.
Wow.
Their whole lives.
And then
as far as I knew them.
And then they had a house.
Yeah.
They had a piece of property they lived in, and then they got free food as long as you stayed within the guidelines.
Yeah. Yep.
You were pretty much taken care of.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
I was thinking earlier, too, your upbringing, for one, I'm a little bit jealous of your ability to use your hands. Like, you know so much about construction. I'm a general contractor. I know a lot about construction. I know a lot about a few of the trades really well that I could maybe do myself. You could almost build a house from scratch because you've worked in every facet of construction from the time you were, I'm going to say 14 to 21, but also maybe even go back to 8 years old. I mean, like, I'm a huge gardener. Like, you know how to garden, you know how to plant plants, you know what plants work in St. George in that climate, which ones don't. Like, you're actually giving an incredible education to be able to solely survive on this planet and not have to rely on anybody else but you. Like, I'm just fascinated by your expertise and your ability to do things with your hands, right?
Yes.
Like, I'm a handy guy, but I'm nowhere near as handy as you are. And it's actually like a blessing, but at the same time, being raised in that religion and being taught, like, hey, you got to think this way, that could be somewhat of, I guess, a curse. But, like, these child labor stuff and whatever, like, yes, I disagree. You shouldn't be working that hard as a child, but darn, you sure learned how to take care of yourself at a young age.
Yes.
Like, you're independent.
Yes. Very
right?
independent.
Like, that's pretty incredible.
Yes. That's one thing that religion did teach us as young people. It taught us how to be independent. It taught us to realize what Mother Nature could and could not offer us to be able to survive in the desert, just growing up in that area. So, yeah, I have a lot of knowledge of growing up there and knowledge of how the earth works and how Mother Nature works.
Yeah, and I know we've talked a lot today about your dad and what a genius he was, like,
yes.
a really, really intelligent human being, which we'll touch base on that. So let's go from 8 to 14. You're working, you're doing chores, you're weeding the neighborhood, and I can't imagine how many other things you do. You're probably over cleaning the ward house or temple or, whatever needed to be done, right?
Yes.
No pay, though, right?
No pay. No.
No
money
pay.
wasn't even a part of the picture. It was never talked about. Like, we didn't even know what money was as kids.
Really?
We had no idea.
So you just go and you work, and you guys go frame a house for an outsider. All that money goes to your boss that's running the crew.
Mm-hmm.
I assume he gives that money to Warren Jeffs and whoever's managing the funds for the religion. So all the money's always being shifted towards the upper echelon of the religion, right?
Yes.
And then they disperse all that money according to what they believe they think that you guys need. The storehouse, you got a nice little home when you turn 20, 21, blah, 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 right?
Yeah. Yes, that's exactly correct. All the money's earned in the religion go to the higher ups, and then it's dispersed economically to however they feel fit and need to compensate for the community or the people, however it runs. And that's still going on to this very day, except for they're very poor at managing their money or taking care of any of their people. So
Really?
I don't know how long that's last much longer. But
Jeez Louise.
I still hear of crews doing that to this very day, that they're still out there just framing and giving the money away.
Yeah. And that's just how you're brought up. It's just what you do, right? It's like, it's not, my money, it's our money. And then they just disperse it according to whatever they think your needs are. Or Warren Jeff takes it and goes and parties.
Hey.
Right?
Find a couple $100,000 in an SUV with a boatload of cell phones and all that other stuff without throwing some party somewhere.
Jeez. I gotta, just because this popped in my head. So I remember when we walked through there. Okay, we'll get back to the Idaho story. I remember when we walked through the Colorado City. We went to the cemetery. And there was tons of little mini grave sites, like babies.
Yes.
Explain, why is there so many babies in the cemetery?
Okay, so in our town in Colorado City, they have what they call the regular cemetery, where if you die, you're buried there. But they also have another cemetery called the infant cemetery, where all infants that passed away between a certain time until not very long ago, like, it's pretty much been the base of the town since probably the 1960s clear up into the 2000s, where any infant that passed away in the town was buried there in the Utah Infant Cemetery. So they have, it's kind of creepy. My wife doesn't even like to look at it as we drive by every time we go up to the Water Canyon, but it's just a grave full of hundreds of infant grave sites.
So that's not just from the FLDS.
That is just from the FLDS.
But why is there so many babies that were dying?
Well, I think here's one reason. If you have a town that's sitting there and you have, for one, you're trying to be independent. You're not trying to associate yourself with the outside world. So you're trying to create your own, like, even to where you take care of your own dead and bury them in underneath your own guidelines in your hands. You don't want any outside interference with it. So they dedicated 2 plots of land to that. And as far as I've known, that town has held its own cemeteries. Whoever's passed away there, they get buried at home at the Isaac Carding Cemetery. My grandfather's buried there. My uncle's buried there. My sister's buried there. And up until, like I mentioned before, that I think the early 2000s, all the babies that passed away in that town, the Colorado City area, were buried in that cemetery for that location. It was just kind of the way it was set up. I don't know why, religious-wise, and I think it's because religious-wise, if I remember correctly, it's that infants have direct access to the celestial kingdom because they're innocent and pure. They don't have any blessings, so they tried setting, they get all their blessings, so they tried to set up a more, like, pure spot, like a better place to rest the babies that passed away. And here's another thing that I just thought. You have a town in the 1950s, you have midwives delivering babies for multiple wives per one guy. It's just literally thousands of babies without all the medical technology that we have today to keep them alive. Babies didn't live. If they had a certain health problem or something, it wasn't it was more or less not practiced in the religion to take them to a doctor. Like, it was practiced like, if they made it, that was God's choice. That was God's decision whether they lived or died, because they made it. That was a part of the life, natural way.
They didn't even consider taking a baby to the hospital if it was ill at birth or up until they're 1 year old. They just would try to figure it out with their own medicine, do whatever they do with their own practice. And if the baby didn't survive, the baby just simply didn't survive.
Yeah, and I mean,
but you're not going to the hospital.
Yeah, that was kind of
frowned upon.
Yeah, even me growing up in the 90s, that was, dude, you got a if your bone wasn't sticking out of your freaking arm, you weren't going to the hospital. You were okay. If you were
Did they have like a little local medic center, and you just go down there and say, I hurt my arm, I need stitches?
And if they thought it was bad enough, then they had a Aunt Lydia Jessup was an amazing lady. She could set bones herself, and she was the nurse of the town, and
She was the nurse slash doctor.
slash midwife slash doctor.
So
Everything.
she took care of everybody.
Everything.
And then I assume all of the childbirth was all natural childbirth.
Yes.
No C-sections.
None of that stuff. So
no
none of
medicine.
that stuff. Nope. So there's another cause too, if you're thinking about it, that why a couple of ladies passed away and some children might have been, buried in that cemetery too, because there's that fallout too, for that very case. Yeah.
They couldn't do a cesarean, so the mother and the child would both pass.
Yeah. And I mean, back in the 1960s, 70s, that was a pretty big deal anyways.
Sure. Yeah. I think
That was way
cesarean
bigger
came along later in life. I think a lot of mothers passed
Yeah.
back in the early 30s,
Oh,
40s,
they did.
and 50s.
A lot of them
right, 'cause
didn't
we
make
didn't have
it.
that technology.
Yeah.
Wow.
I know my first kid was a C-section, so I understand that. Like, Steph wouldn't be here if it wasn't for that technology today.
Yeah. Wow. It's crazy. Okay, so we're backtracking a little bit here. So let's get back to your Idaho thing. One more question. You mentioned the water hole.
Okay.
What's the water hole
So
in Colorado City?
there's two reservoirs. The original water hole was the North Reservoir because the South Reservoir came later on down the road. So growing up, the water canyon and the creek, if you headed north, went up towards Zions, and there's a big reservoir up at the top of our town where all the rainwater come down, they collect into a reservoir there. And also, if you kept walking up the creek, you'd go up the backside of Zions, and there's all the waterfalls and stuff. You go play in the water there too. But the watering hole was the North Reservoir, and it was the main watering holding place for the town at that point growing up. So all as kids, that's what we did to swim. We'd go up to the water hole. And that was either go up to the creek, find a couple splash/rock holes to swim in and dive in, or go to the reservoir and paddle out there a few feet in the murky water and then paddle back.
Yeah. And also you would go there to actually get water, right? Isn't there a spring at the bottom of the canyon?
That is a part of the water source, but that's not where we get our water. So there's a watering well up at Maxwell Canyon Park, and it's drilled into the fresh spring water well that's up there. And that well was solely sourced for drinking water for the whole community to have drinking water in the desert. And they set it up that way. And I have been drinking that water my whole life, and I still drink it to this very day, and it's still available to the public.
All right. So that's a well that's in the canyon, but that's not part of the water hole.
No.
Okay. Just wanted to clarify. Cool. Okay, so take us back to your 18-year-old self. You're being a little rebellious. You're drinking. You go to Idaho, do some concrete work.
So, yeah, okay, we'll get there. So I get done framing. I get sick of that at a young age. I go into concrete work. I get out of state. I'm up in northern Idaho building this huge carbon fiber manufacturing plant with the Roundy brothers and Sonora Sun concrete. And a few of my friends that I hadn't been raised and worked with. So it was a really nice breath of fresh air getting in with some new people that weren't my family. They couldn't really boss and kick my ass around as much as my uncles could. And it was a really nice, refreshing taste. And I got going into, building, started off with footings, and then I got into steel work, tying rebar, and then I got into flat work. Started doing, I guess a lot of flat work was panels, tilt panels. So we were doing a lot of finishing and time bar and tilt panels, building that carbon fiber factory. And then from there, I was still working for that company, doing concrete, and they had landed a job up in Great Falls, Montana, at the Air Force Base, at Malmstrom Air Force Base. And this was a huge undertaking. This was a 2 to 3 year project of the housing complex for the military on the Air Force Base. So the polygamist group, I don't know who actually got the job because there were so many people that came up there. Who was the actual general of it, I never even knew. So a lot of us boys got shipped clear up north by the Canada border to go to work in, I mean, the summers were great, but as soon as those are over, it was some of the most miserable, cold, long hauling days any concrete guy could ever ask for in sub-degree temperatures trying to do military work. If you've had any chance to work with those guys and the Army Corps of Engineers, it is just, it's a battle. It's war from one day to another. So
that was brutal.
it was very brutal.
Really hard.
Learned a lot, though. I learned how to build structures as strong as military spec to guide. We built everything from storage pillboxes for the militaries for their whatever they needed to store in, to the military housing complexes, how they built the foundations, to the footings, to the walls, to the roof, how it's all put together to be pretty much bomb-proof is on another level.
So way different specs than our current building industry
way different.
Requires today.
Double the amount of structure that goes in.
Yeah. Concrete, rebar.
Double the grid, double the PSI on the mud. Just all that. Wow. It's way stronger.
Yeah. So from there, you worked there for a while, and then what?
Yeah, so we ended up traveling from northern Idaho to Great Falls, Montana to start this Air Force Base project, and it was a massive project. And all of us boys knew that we were pretty much getting sent up there to just be slaves. None of us were really making any money at that time or earning anything, if hardly anything. We barely had. It was just a day-to-day struggle just to live, to even find fuel for our vehicles just to get to the job site. I mean, we'd get to the point where my uncle would scrap his rebar off his job to pay for the fuel, to put in his truck, to go to work, to tie more rebar for these guys.
Really? So you're up there. You're obviously being paid, but they've paid the religion somehow. The check went to them. They're not really giving you money for per diem for food. You obviously have room and board that somebody's paying for, but they're not even giving you money to put gas in your vehicle, and you're up there working yourself to near death and still not getting paid.
Yep.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
And they're not.
There's still boys that haven't gotten their checks from that job.
Really?
And the owner of it, I know really well, Craig, from Sonora Sun. Like, he's a really good friend of mine. He just looks at us boys and goes, "Sorry, man. Like, I got taken advantage of my millions just as much as you guys."
Yeah. But did somebody got paid, right?
Yeah, Warren Jeffs.
Warren Jeffs got paid. Period.
Warren Jeffs or Lyle Jeffs got paid hundreds of thousands, if not millions.
They basically just send you guys all there. Here's our crew, our army. Go work yourself down to your raw knuckles, and then they were receiving the payments and not giving you not even 5 or 10% of that to survive off of.
Yeah, maybe 5 to 10%. You know.
So but do they actually hand you money or give you a check, or are they just like somebody was there to feed you?
They'd hand us a check most of the time, and we'd look at them like, "Is this damn thing going to bounce?" And we go to cash it, so we can live for the next month and pay for our family's meals,
So like every once a week, once a month, you get a check up there?
Once a month, maybe, if you're lucky.
And it wasn't even enough to get gas or eat.
Okay, here's an example how it worked. So I wasn't making any money, but I'm the type of guy that I won't just sit back and say, "Yo, I'm not going to live this way for the rest of my life." So I went and found my boss when I would come down once a month for my meetings, and I would go straight to his office, and I would sit in a chair until he showed up at that office on the weekends. And I'd be like, "I need some gas so I can go back to work to Great Falls. Can you cut me a check? And then maybe you can hopefully add another couple hundred to that so I can survive when I'm up there. Thank you very much." And he'd be like, "Oh, yeah, I figured see what I could do, Call a couple people, round up a couple $100. Just the best I can do. Thanks for your efforts." And we'd be like, "Hey, well, I begged and pleaded and prodded, and this is what I got out of it. I'm going to be grateful because at least I have something better than nothing."
You'd get a few $100 and then go back to work.
Go back up there. In my dad's little Hyundai.
No
go
way.
Back up there.
For a month.
For a whole month. because we had priesthood meetings every month, which the elders had to come down and meet at the meeting house once a month, tell their bishops that they were doing right, get a pat on the head, you're doing a good job, then go back out to their labors to bring in the income. Where do you think Warren Jeffs got all these millions to build this huge temple in Texas?
Wow.
It came from us guys, slaving in the vineyards all over the United States, and it flowed to him millions and millions of dollars that he put that mansion up with and bought Texas Ranch with.
And he has everybody in the fold convinced that this is the right way. This is your way to heaven.
It was more than convinced. We believed it to our very death. Like, it was very interesting to watch it all unfold one day.
Please. It's crazy.
So yeah, I worked up in Great Falls for about 2.5 years before I finally came home one day, and I was 21.
A little closer to your mic. You're 21.
I was 21, and my dad had gotten wind that I'd been messing around with a girl up there, and I was pretty serious with this girl. Like, I had been sneaking out a lot with her. I'd been going to, going out to eat at the bars, going to a couple movies with her, just getting to know her, because I was at a point in my life where I knew that I was either going to move on one way or another with a lady. I just wanted to get married. I wanted to have kids. I wanted to be happy, and that was just my gut instinct. And I met her one time at a restaurant, and it kind of took off from there. And she was a Gentile. She didn't have nothing to do with the religion, so it was way interesting to me just to get into knowing a different family, a different girl, and just a whole nother side of the world that I had no idea about.
And what age was this?
I was 21.
21. And you met her
22, yep.
in what state or city?
In Great Falls, Montana.
In Great Falls, Montana.
Yeah. She was a little waitress / bartender on the border there in Great Falls. She was like barely 20, 21 herself. And anyways, it kind of took off from there. And then one night, I don't know what we were talking about. One of the boys was like, and Andrew's been off with this girl. And then I guess one of the other guys that was more top button religious is like, what the heck? And went and told my boss, and then got to my dad, and then, it got to the bishop, and before I knew it, I was getting calls from the bishop. Hey, can you come home this weekend and meet with me? I've been hearing there's some stuff going on. I'm like, great. Now this is it. This is the one right here. Like, all the alcohol, all the stuff I've gotten in trouble before, this is the one right here. Because I knew I had taken it too far. Like,
this is a big story.
This is kind of how I got to the point where I was so in my mind that I knew that I was an independent person and my own man.
Yeah.
That I didn't want to be married in that religion and have continue on the rest of my life.
Okay, so you met this girl when you're 21 and met her at the bar, restaurant, or whatever. Mm-hmm. So I assume, I don't know, but did you get physical with her?
Yeah. No, there was no question about that. My curiosity, being a young man, all my testosterone, and dude, it was one thing led to another faster, and I could put a dampener on it. So yeah, I lost my virginity to her, and
wow.
And of course, we ended up breaking up later. But that was.
How long did you date her?
I dated her for probably about 6 months.
Do you remember when you got physical and you were doing your thing? Like, did you have a tremendous amount of guilt because of how you were brought up, or were you like, wow, this is cool?
It was more of the adrenaline. Wow, this is cool. And I'm gonna say, dude, I had no fear of that other option, because I actually was staying at my boss's house in Great Falls. Because I left and I went back to Great Falls. We'll tell some more of the story later, how I left and went back to Great Falls. Mm-hmm. So I left and went back to Great Falls, and I ended up taking her to my bedroom inside the workhouse.
You did?
With all the guys there. I'd end up taking her, sneaking her in the house at night so I could be with her, and then I'd end up driving her back.
How did they not know?
Dude, I don't know. I have no idea. We were just sneaky enough at the right times of night that no one really noticed.
Wow. No one had a clue.
I think my uncle had a pretty good idea that I was off doing because he was my foreman, and
Did he care?
he didn't care. He was on the verge of, later on he ended up leaving his wife, 2 kids, and leaving the religion and getting out of there. But
Yeah.
he didn't. He was more or less congratulating me that I was actually, branching out and doing something with my life.
Wow.
Because he thought the religion was all BS too.
Wow. That is crazy.
So he kind of fueled my ego to do it, and I think that's why I kept doing it.
Yeah.
Because I didn't really have a dampener.
Wow.
I didn't have a dad. I had nobody there to oversee me to tell me yes or no. I just did what my gut instinct told me to do.
Doing your thing, right? Doing what a natural human being that's never been with a female would do.
And so, that was a good run with her, and I learned a lot. And then,
You ever spoken with her since?
yes,
Really?
yes,
Cool young lady?
yeah, very cool.
Neat.
Yeah,
And she
very
knew
sharp.
She knew that you were in the FLDS religion, and she was all good and gangbusters to have a good time.
Yeah,
She didn't care?
She actually, after I ended up leaving, after moving out of the Great Falls house there, working with everybody, I actually moved into her dad's house and stayed with her dad and worked for her dad for a minute there.
Oh, nice.
And got to meet her mom, got to know their family really, really well.
And tell her name?
Tiffany?
Tiffany. What was her last name? Remember? Been a while. 14
Don't remember
years.
the last names. I remember everybody's first name.
So you
Mix. Tiffany Mix. Brian and Julie and Tiffany Mix.
Brian and Julie's the mom and dad.
Yep.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Really generous people. Her mom's a sweetheart.
Good for you. So you got to meet some Gentiles at 21.
Yeah.
Got to meet what's on the other side of that FLDS religion. Met some neat people, it sounds like.
No, they were very big-hearted people that seen me, that knew that I was out on the street and I was trying to make an effort for myself. I just didn't know which way to go exactly, but I was trying. It was not like I was just.
Gotcha. So you come home. You got to go back and talk to the bishop.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
How's that go?
So that's really awkward. Really awkward. So, anyways, the bishop gets wind of this, and he's like, this is Lyle Jeffs.
And Lyle's, what's his relation to Warren?
Brother.
He
is the bishop.
He's the bishop.
At this point in time in my life.
Okay.
And my dad had gotten wind of that I'd been messing around with the girl, so he's like, you're not allowed in my house or anything to do with my family until you talk to the bishop and he sees what's going on and what direction you want your life to go, and we'll go from there. But until then, you got to have a conversation with the bishop and me, and then we'll see whether you will allow you back in my house. So I ended up coming back down to Colorado City and living with my uncle for about a week and a half. And I remember this very well. I got sick of sitting home waiting for this phone call. And I'm just like, what the heck? Is this bishop ever going to call me? Am I ever going to feel like I got my life back to normal? I'm just feeling guilt and shame and wondering, if I'm ever going to be accepted as a human anymore because I made this choice and now everybody knows about it and I'm feeling bad or guilty. So I'm just like, all right, I got to get back to work. I can't just sit here and do nothing. So my brother Daryl had just left the religion too at that point in time. And he was doing tile work up in Seattle, Washington, Tacoma, Washington. 18 hours away from home. And we were up there just doing a big, huge sports gym, doing the lockers, doing the pool, doing everything tile. And he's like, you want to come help me? I'm just like, yeah, sure. I'd had some tile work experience work in the past, and not doing anything. Let's go. And so I get up there, and the person that is renting the house wouldn't let me live in the house because he knew the situation that I was in with my dad, and he wouldn't allow me to sleep with the other, in with the rest of the crew because he didn't want me to be a bad influence or, anything. So there's this little tiny shed out back that had this little roll-up door that I threw an air mattress down. And, well, I was kind of accustomed to that anyways, because I've been living in a garage since then anyways.
You were living in a garage?
Yeah, and in Great Falls, we built the garage into rooms because there wasn't enough rooms in the house for the whole crew. So we threw the garage together as rooms.
And slept in the garage?
And slept in the garage. That was my uncle's room, my adopted cousin's room, and my room. That's what we lived in. But anyways, I'm laying here on this pillow first thing this morning, and I'm just looking at this wall, and also my phone rings first thing in the morning. I'm like, no one calls me first thing in the morning this early. What the heck? And I pick it up, and it's an unknown ID. And that was like a telltale sign that the bishop was trying to get a hold of you, or someone in authority was trying to get a hold of you. So I'm like, my adrenaline shoots out the roof. I answer it. Hello? Hi. Is this Andrew Ream? This unfamiliar voice. I'm just like, yeah. She's like, the bishop has a message for you, and he would like to talk to you. Are you alone and available without any recording devices? And I'm just like, yeah. I'm sitting here in a little room. You just woke me up. And he's like, okay, he'll be on in a minute. And I'm sitting there and pausing, about to ping out of my head with adrenaline. And I'm waiting. About a minute and a half goes by. All of a sudden I hear this click. He's like, hello? And I knew immediately it was Lyle because I'd heard his voice a million times in church. I'm like, hello, this is Andrew Ream. How are you? And he's like, hi, I heard you've been getting into girl problems. I heard this and this was the situation. Is that true? And I'm like, yeah, I wasn't going to deny it, like everybody already knew about it. I was just like, yeah, that's the situation. He's like, well, have you gone this far with her? And I'm just like, yeah, asking very personal questions. Have you done this? Have you done this? Have you done this? Like dissecting it all. I'm just like, yeah. Me and her kind of got crazy, a little bit drunk crazy. Like we did stuff, like he's just like, well, you made your choices and you're a son of perdition. Now we can tell, but I want to give you one more opportunity to come back home and talk to me face to face and repent on this. Are you willing to do that choice, make that choice? And I'm just like, yeah, I'll come in and talk to you. He's like, okay, well, in 2 weeks, I want you to be at this certain building at this time. I want you to come with your dad and your mom, and I want to talk to you about all this stuff. I'm like, okay. So I keep working for 2 more weeks doing tile, and time comes go home, and I have to borrow a car and head home 20 hours back to the creek. And next day was Saturday, and I wake up and go out to R&W's office there, which is where his office was.
Who's R&W?
Willie Jessup. He sued the pants off of the United Effort Plan for all the crap they ever did to him. So, yeah, he got his chunk.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
I assume he's left
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
religion.
Yeah, he's been in and out of courts, totally sued the Jeffs for every penny that he could possibly get out of them.
Huh.
And they awarded him nicely, the courts did.
Did they?
Oh, yeah.
I assume you guys could all have a lawsuit if you really wanted to, right?
Yeah, if we drawed up the papers, yeah. If we had the knowledge to like sit down a lawyer and draw up the papers for child labor and all this stuff, and you could write up a lawsuit, but you'd be milking a dry cow for more dry milk. I don't know if you'd get much more out of it because there's been so many lawsuits against UEP. It's kind of crazy.
What's UAP?
UEP, United Effort Plan Trust.
What's that?
That was the trust that was set up for the community to hold all the money and funding, and pretty much it was the bank for the trust, and the head of the UEP, the Jeffs, and Fred Jessup, the one that originally set it up as a trust so it couldn't be taxed, and they could work and do community stuff what they needed to do with the communal money without having government or city come in and saying yes or no. So that
was the entity they set up where all the money funneled to.
Yes, it was a trust.
Okay.
At the end of the day, the courts took over that trust and handled it and says, you're going to pay us back or we're going to take all your land.
Gotcha. Okay, so how did the meeting go?
So, anyways, this meeting
Saturday.
Yes, Saturday. I go to this building, and of course I'm a little bit freaked out because I know my time's coming, whether I'm going to be making a big decision in my life. I just knew it. I felt it in my gut. Every fiber of my being told me that I was a young man making a choice going to this building, that I was gonna pretty much direct where I was headed for the rest of my life. So I get there, I open up the front door, and then there's a man in a suit standing there, and he steps in front of me, and he goes, "Who are you? What you here for? Who are you here to see? And what time is your appointment?" It's like, Lyle Jeff told me to be here today at noon to meet him to talk about this. He's just like, okay. He's like, wait here. And as the doors open, it's kind of like a corridor that they swing open and they don't quite close before another door opens. So you can kind of look down the hall as things are going. And every door, there's a security guard behind it. There's 3 doors. They all fold open to get down the hall. And behind every door, there's a person dressed in a suit. And I couldn't tell you if they're armed or security because at the time, Lyle was running from the law, just like Warren. And so that was their game, is if they could put as many people in front of a person before the law or a person could get to that person, that was their escape. That's how they handled those situations. They didn't do it through force, they did it through numbers. So if an officer of law came looking or heard he was in that building, they would hit the first guy, they'd stop him, question him. Second guy would stop and question him. Third guy would stop and question him. By that time, that guy that they're looking for is gone out the back door and 80 miles an hour down the highway. But I just kept wondering, I just kept getting this eerie feeling. What am I walking into? What am I doing here? What are all these guys doing in suits? I never remember a meeting being like this before with the bishop or the prophet. It just didn't feel right. It didn't feel good. And I'm just like, okay, well, we're going to do this. So I go in there, and my dad and mom are already sitting in there.
Did you know that at the time?
Yeah, I knew that they were going to be there. My dad called Lyle, and he's like, I want to arrange it to where you're here with your parents. But at the same time, as I go through the last door to go into his office, there's another couple sitting here, and they have a girl sitting there off on a bench. I had no idea who she was. All I remember is she was kind of tall and had blonde hair. I didn't know who the parents were really. And so I just kind of glanced. It was more of a glancing pass as I passed by. Okay, well, they're here for whatever, and didn't think much of it. And I went in. And I go in there, and in front of my parents and in front of his security, which was Dwayne Barlow at that time, he asked me this question. He goes, "Hey, Andrew, I heard that you have been making, I don't know what the exact word is for it, if you have relations with a woman or not. But in a religious context, he's like, you're pretty much doing this sin, What do you believe this to be true?" And I'm like, yeah, you already asked me this. And he's like, did you do this with this woman? Which was, sexual relations in another sense. I'm just like, yeah,
So he was particular, graphically,
very particular.
Exactly what did you do?
Exactly what did you do? And I'm just like, yeah, well, I did this and I did this and I did this in front of my parents. I'm admitting this stuff to him, and he is grilling me for it. And he's just like, okay, well, since you did this, it seems like that you have a chance to repent. It was almost like he wanted me to keep being in because I was such a good asset or something for him. And he's like, you have the opportunity to go from a distance and repent and come back every other week and let me know what you're doing and write a letter to Warren Jeffs in prison of what you've been doing and all your sins that you've committed. And then we'll think about letting you come back into the community. That's your option. And then he's like, as soon as you come back, like he was feeding me with the gold nugget, I want you to come back and marry this girl out here and go to Colorado to start the next Air Force base. They're just getting into a whole nother phase over in Colorado with a brand new Air Force base.
Really? So, couple questions on that. So, at this time, you were 21. Warren Jeffs was in jail already?
Yes.
So, he had already been caught and being prosecuted.
He was on the run. He was not caught and prosecuted yet, but nobody
running.
knew where he was. He was on the run from the feds. He had been on the run for a while. He wasn't communicating with anybody.
Okay. I gotcha. Wow. So, you go through all that, and then he says, I'd like you to marry the lady out front and go to Colorado and take it on from there.
Yeah, he's just like, you go out for a few months, back to what you're doing tile, send a letter to Warren every week of what you're doing, come to me every other week on your visits here in town, tell me how you're doing, let me know what's going on.
Did you actually write the letters to Warren?
No.
Did you ever update the bishop, Lyle, at the time?
No.
No.
I'm going to tell you what happened.
Okay. And then one question, too. I lost my train of thought. The reason that he wants you to stay is because you were an asset. You were a free laborer making that religion a ton of money. Of course he wants you to stay. And you're a hell of a worker. I've seen it. I've witnessed it with my own eyes. You're a massive asset to the religion, along with all of your worker buddies and brothers and whoever else was in the community that was also slaving away at the expense of the FLDS religion.
Yes.
Of course they want to keep you in. Wouldn't you want to keep a free employee?
Oh, with my stature and standing, I would hate to see him leave. Yeah. Hell, I might even pay him. Stick around.
Of course you would. Okay, so he says, and what happens? So you don't write a letter to Warren. You don't follow up with a bishop. Then what?
He's asking me this question. You have the choice to leave and repent from a distance, pretty much. And I looked him dead in the face. I had $800 in my pocket. Somehow my dad didn't get a hold of because I went right to my tile boss and got my pay. I had an 88 pickup, didn't have any power steering. And I was sitting there thinking to myself, you know what? These guys are all a bunch of nutcases. They are literally trying to get me to do the same thing I just got through doing, but just in a different way. And I'm like, I looked at Lyle, I took 2 looks at my parents, and I was like, I'm going to go, but I'm not coming back. And Dad looked at me, he's like, what do you mean you're not coming back? I was like, I'm leaving the religion. I am going to go, and I'm not coming back.
Wow.
And my mom just started breaking down crying, of course. And Lyle's like, you sure you want to make that choice? You're just cast out forever. You don't get any blessings. You'll never amount to anything. Of course, my dad, all the way home, I had to listen to that too.
What did your dad say?
Pretty much repeat what Bishop said, like, you're losing all your blessings. Do you understand what choice you're making? You won't have anything. You'll never be married. You'll never have any children or amount to anything because you'll lose everything if you make this choice. I just knew it in my gut, though, that it was all just false. It was. By a good feeling in my chest, in me, I just knew that it was not life on earth.
I got to give you kudos, bro, for following your gut and trusting your gut. Right there in that moment, you're losing everything that you've ever lived and were conditioned and trained to do, and you honored yourself and said, I'm out of here. I got to go find a better life for myself.
You know what's even crazier?
What?
Is when I told him where I was going.
Where were you going?
It says, hey, I'm headed to Great Falls tomorrow in my 88 pickup, and there's not a damn thing you can do to stop me. And my dad looks at me, and he goes, you really? And I'm like, yeah. And I went at home and started packing up all my tools that afternoon. And dude, as soon as I started doing that, like, it started shaking the bells upstairs with my whole family, like my sisters, my brothers. Everybody was crying and begging me to stay. Like I was making a death choice. Like I was literally going out there to die. And I was just so pissed off and mad at that point. I was more or less mad than anything. I had a really big thing on my shoulder with my dad telling me what to do. So this was kind of one of those things where I just was like, when it got to that point, I threw it completely in his face and walked out the door pissed off. And that's been our relationship on that note ever since that. So,
Yeah. Dude,
it's kind of been a little bit hard on that.
I just can't tell you how proud I am of you to be able to put your foot down. And I mean, dude, you're leaving everything you know. Your mom, your dad, your siblings, your life, everything.
Yep. I didn't, at that point,
You were clear in that moment. You knew what your next step was.
Yes. There was no question in my gut. I knew it.
And you were 21.
Yep.
It's fascinating that you had the ability to do that. And how many siblings do you have?
13.
13 siblings.
Yeah.
So you're leaving 13 siblings, mom, dad, all your friends, and the entire community, and you're going to Montana.
Yeah, I was the first one to pull this out of the sons of the Ream generation as far as grandsons.
You were the first one to leave the religion.
Grandson to leave the religion, yeah.
By the way, his name is Andrew Ream. I don't know if I said your last name when we started the podcast, but Andrew Ream. You were the first to check out.
Yeah. Yep.
Damn. You're a trailblazer. How many cents have left of your siblings?
That's been the good thing. Let's see. I've got my brother Daryl, and my sister Naomi, I got my sister Katrina, and I have Rachel.
So 4?
4.
So there's 5 of you total.
Yeah.
8 are still in.
Yes.
Wow.
And my sister just had a baby. So yeah, it's just
amazing.
It's kind of an awkward thing too, because I don't really have a good relationship with my siblings because of that note, they talk to me still, the ones that are out, but like fluent conversation, just hi, like Katrina today.
Yeah, I listened.
She's the most fluent one. She's
Really?
kind of like me. She'll talk like me, but the rest of them, how you doing?
Yeah. So at my house this morning, I listened to that conversation intently. It was very basic, like no real depth to it. Very surface. Not like really how you doing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was very basic. The reason you called your sister, I asked him if he had a picture of his mom or dad. He showed me a picture of his mom, and then he has a sister, Katrina.
Yeah.
That was I guess she's kind of the one that keeps track of all of the photos and family memorabilia, and she was going to dig up a couple photos because I want to see a picture of your dad also.
Yeah, there's a really good picture of, I think, somewhere of my dad where Angelina was living in Phoenix there for a minute, where she was on full medical, where Make-A-Wish Foundation came in and took them to SeaWorld.
Oh, and explain to the listeners, Angelina's your sister.
Yes.
She had a disability.
Yes.
And what was that exactly?
She was born with multiple disabilities that left her in vegetable state. She couldn't eat on her own. She couldn't walk. She couldn't see. She couldn't talk. She could communicate through emotion and clicks and grunts. But as far as all cognitive skills of she could hear really, really, really well. That was one of her only things that she could do really well, because she did never really develop eyes, so she never could see. And she could never walk because her brain, mind, body connection to make her arms and legs move wasn't there. It wasn't developed. So it wasn't genetical. It just was never formed in her brain.
Why do you think that was?
Well, my mom had complications at pregnancy with Angelina, and she went and got a DNC, which they go in and clean out the baby from the mom's uterus. So there can't be complications later before the baby is ever, very far term. And that was a very large thing for my mom, because that was not supposed to happen in the religion. The whole taking on the life of a baby type thing is a huge thing with the religion, and anything that had to do with that kept on the very down low. So my mom went and had that procedure done because it was life-threatening for some reason or another. I think it was a cyst on her ovaries or something. It was just some cancer or something. I can't remember. Went and got it all removed, and a couple weeks later, she's all talking to my midwife now. She said, I feel pregnant. And Helen's like, oh, okay, let's go check it out. Let's go take pictures. Let's go look. And sure enough, there was a baby in there. After all that, there was a fetus forming and growing. And what happened is when the doctors were in there doing that in the embryo, they pretty much made scrambled eggs out of Angelina when she was in there. Yes. And they didn't get her out. And so she kept growing. And she ended up turning out to be complete veg state and no cognitive functions and thinking of any sort of thought. But the interesting thing about all this is a lot of people said that she wouldn't live past 1, but she lived to be 15 years old.
Wow. So they took care of her for 15 years. And she passed about, 2 or 3 years ago?
2 years ago now, almost.
Yeah. Can you share, I know you told me when we chatted last year, you go to the funeral, haven't seen your mom, dad in years.
Years, yep.
Like 12 years.
10 plus years, yeah.
You've spoken to your mom a couple of times.
Yes.
Because she every once in a while would call you on your birthday, which she's not supposed to.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
But she would reach out. What happened when you saw your siblings and your mom and dad at the funeral? Walk us through that a little bit.
Oh, wow. Okay, we'll just start from top to bottom there. I pull up the funeral home, and I'm looking around, and this is it. This is in St. George. This isn't at the creek, so we're having they're having the viewing right there in St. George where the public could come see, And so I walk into this room. This is COVID. I have a mask on because I'm really conscious about my son, getting anything, and I'm being super careful, hand sanitizer, shaking hands, keeping a mask on, and pretty much no one else in that room had a mask on. So I was trying to keep my distance from people as it was, in a sense, but also trying to be respectful and say hi to my family, the ones that would say hi. So I walk into the funeral home, and it's just like any typical funeral. They have pictures of the person that's passed on the next life there, and their viewing of their life, and you go and you see pictures, and then normally there's parents standing there and then siblings next to the casket, and you're shaking hands and saying hello and going through the line, looking at the passed on, paying respects, and then you move on and go forward. So that's basically what I did as a young man growing up. We didn't really shed tears or do anything for the past. We just always were taught it was a graduation exercise, and which in our reality it really is. It was taught to us in a weird sense. So we'd always have this really awkward, humbling feeling when we went to funerals or viewings of like we were supposed to be really quiet and not talk a lot or show any emotions. You're supposed to be like, hello, hi, and just get through the line and do our thing and be respectful. So I was doing that, and I go to shake my dad's hand, go see all my sister's pictures, go up the line, and I go to shake my dad's hand. And he's like, Andrew. And then he literally turned his whole body, feet, shoulders, and head, stuck out his hand, shook my hand like a limp frickin' D. And I shook his hand and held it for a second, trying to get his eye contact. Nothing.
He wouldn't even.
He wouldn't even look me in the eyes. Had his head turned the whole time like this, and his feet. So that was a total me knowing body language doing sales. That's no, I don't want to talk to you or be around you. And I'm just like, okay, that's how you still feel about it. Didn't do anything about it, just kept going down the line. Gave my older sister the biggest hug. First time she's seen me in 13 years, you know. And I was really close sibling with her. So she's asked me, hi, how you doing? You know, like a normal person. I'm just like, holy cow, Adora, how are you doing? You know, like, it's good to see you.
What was her name?
Adora.
So she actually was compassionate and kind.
Yes,
gave
very.
A big hug.
And
And
not,
she's still in.
Yeah, and not like her, too, because she's the shyest one out of our family. Like, it was really surprising to me. I'm like, hi, how are you doing? It's good to see you. Sure to love you. You know, you're looking good. Like, hope I get to see you again later, you know? And go to my mom, give her a hug. Obviously, it's a bunch of tears. And my mom hugs me and a little bit more sympathetic and talkative. And, hi, how are you? Like, you doing all right? Yeah, you know, this is hard. I'm here for you, you know? Can't imagine how you're feeling, but I know I'm here to support you right now while I'm here helping, you know. What can I do for you, you know? Just sit here next to me because Dad wouldn't even sit next to Mom. And so I sat next to Mom through the whole thing. My dad's just looking down at this pulpit. He wouldn't even look out in the audience, just talking about this girl's life. And it was just so awkward and just so degrading to me as a man meeting my dad. I think that was the biggest take from it all, is how to this very day, after 12, 13 years, that still hold on to the thought, if I communicate with you, I lose everything that I've ever built in this religion or worked for in this family. I lose it all. Even if I shake your hands and look into your eye, you don't even have to say anything. You know, I think it just blew the top off my cap, and I just thought about that forever. And then I was just like, you know what? My dad's happy where he is. And if he's happy and comfortable and living the life he wants to live right where he is, that's his decision, because he's a grown man and so am I. I'm happy where I'm at. I made my decisions. I don't fully believe in what his decisions are, religious-wise or family ethics, but that's his decision. And he seems to be happy with it because he keeps living that way.
Yeah. And if you think back, like we discussed earlier today, this is back to the Byron Katie, is like, if you believed what they were thinking in that moment, you'd do the same thing too. Like,
Yes.
We're only guilty of being believers. He's been taught that if he talks to an apostate, he literally loses everything. And you're an apostate in his eyes, although you're his son. He can't talk to you. He can't communicate with you. He can't shake your hand. He can't look you in the eye, or he's going to lose his whole life. He's going to lose heaven. He's going to lose like you said, every blessing and everything he's ever been given on this life fades away if you discuss, have a conversation, or, get entangled with an apostate. Yeah. Like, you can see from the big picture, like, I understand that he's got to follow, as I told you today, your dad, in my opinion, and I don't know him, but everything you've told me, he's very good at following the rules.
Yeah.
At following the order, staying in the rails. Your dad was in the military, right? Yes. He was in the Air Force.
Yes.
And flew in the airplanes. He was the radar technician.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I mean, obviously an intelligent human being. Crazy smart brain, right? You've told me how sharp he is.
Very intelligent
then
with math.
You've told me
stuff.
what they've created in that Colorado City. I mean, they were creating a power grid system. They figured out the water. I mean, your dad was all part of putting that whole program together, right? He was one of the geniuses in this polygamous sect.
Yes.
Right?
As far as infrastructure and building, yes.
Yeah, I mean,
absolutely.
Guy's incredibly smart from
Journeyman.
everything you've told me.
Still a journeyman lineman to this day.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And so he's got to follow what he's been taught. Otherwise, he loses everything he's ever gained and earned on this life. It's sad. It's terrible. I can't imagine not talking to my children because they went a different direction. You know, that's what's so lovely about allowing your kids to be, which I'm a huge fan of. I don't guide them anywhere. I don't tell them what religion to believe in. I tell them to figure it out on your own. This is your life. I'm not going to guide you where you're supposed to go. It's not my job. You have this innate ability, and we all do, to do what we got to do to figure out what's going on this planet. And why would I want to guide my children in a certain direction? You know? And so he's just believing the religion and how he was brought up, and that's how he's got to live his life, or he's going to lose everything he ever earned here. It's like the day when you were 21, you said, I'm leaving. You made the choice to leave and to move on and go find a better life for yourself outside of the religion, outside of your family. And look what you've created and what you've done, you know? And dude, you've had to grind. I've been watching you really close. You know, we communicate every 3 or 4 months or whatever. And I mean, dude, where you've come from when I knew you 5 or 6 years ago is like you've moved mountains. And you'll continue to, because you're a you're a go-getter, and you're gonna do what Andrew wants to do. You know what I mean? That little chip on your shoulder is gonna pay you volumes because you're going about this life the way that you know is best and what's right for you and your wife and your 2 children. You know? So kudos to you for having the guts and the courage. I mean, dude, you're fearless. And not many people on this planet are. At 21 years old to say, listen, adios, I'm leaving everything I know behind, and you run to Montana at the age of 21, and you haven't gone back. Well, you've gone back, not into religion, but which we'll get to, is you still live in Colorado City because you have a home there, you know, and that's where you reside. But you haven't gone back into that religion. And dude, I don't know. I'm just fascinated by your ability to follow your truths. Like, I absolutely love it. Like, I look up to you for that. It's really been fun to watch you for the last 5 or 6 years, and see where you're going and what you're up to. I'm impressed by your abilities. So, good job.
Well, thanks, Brandon.
Of course. Okay, so let's go to, you mentioned your son, and the listeners have no idea about Killian. So let's talk about your kids for just a minute.
Okay.
And then we'll get back to you went to Montana. But let's just touch base on, you have a 3-year-old son named Killian. Mm-hmm. You have an 8-year-old daughter, soon to be 9, I believe.
Yes.
In a month.
Stephanie.
And her name is Stephanie. And then your wife's name is?
Alika.
Alika. Alika or Alika?
It's pronounced Alika, but people say Alika.
I want to say it right. Alika.
Alika.
Yes, which you told me earlier is a
Polynesian
for Alice. I love that. And I've met Alika, and she is as sweet as they come. So let's talk briefly about Killian.
Okay.
So Killian has some incredibly difficult health issues. He's 3 years old. I saw you 6 months ago in the hospital, came to see you. He was having some major issues with his esophagus. This young man doesn't talk. He can't eat. He can't chew. He can't swallow. He's bedridden. He needs 24/7 care, which Alika and Andrew take care of this young man. By the way, Alika and Andrew, since they've left the religion, and maybe we could talk about you getting married or whatever, like, he's had to grind. He left there with $800. He is doing better financially currently, but, as often as possible, we're happy to help out and do a few things. So if anyone's out there's listening, this is just coming from my hip. If you guys want to donate some money to some people in need, this family is always in need of some financial help, which when you hear the story about his son that you're going to hear in a second, he's been up at Primary Children's, been to the hospital in St. George, he's been to the hospital in Arizona. Andrew's resuscitated him, I think you told me 6 times this morning. He's nearly passed several times in his short life here thus far. But you guys know where to find me, and if anybody wants to donate to this family, it would be massively appreciated, and the money would go to really a great use. So tell us a little bit about Killian and what happened when he was born.
Okay. So me and my wife, obviously we had our daughter and we wanted a boy. So we pretty much put in perspective, okay, we're going to have a boy. We're going to do everything in our power to have a son and bring this life into this world as healthily and as calmly and as peacefully as possible, because we want this in our life. We want a sibling for Stephanie. We want a young little man. I always wanted a son. And so we made a concrete goal that we were going to have a boy, and we were going to do it sober, and we were going to do it as healthfully as we knew as human beings to bring this life into this world with every opportunity possible to make it, So
And before that, let me just get everybody up to speed. So you were doing a little bit of drinking.
Yeah.
You and your wife.
Yeah.
And by the way, Andrew's a health nut now.
Yeah.
When I very first met him, he was just starting to clean his life up. You were probably 30, 28, or 29. Yeah. So you decided to stop drinking so you could have a really healthy child. You and your wife cleaned up your diets.
Yeah.
No alcohol.
Yep.
Everything. Like you were on point.
I made it a point to be on point. Like, I was tested and tried those times too. I'd have friends offer me multiple times working. So I worked for a landscape company that whole time, and it was just grinding, grueling work out in the hot sun in St. George every day, and 110-degree heats hit the summers. Like, that's what those boys do at the end of the day. They go catch them a cold one, try to take the heat off, and heck, I don't blame them. But too many years of that, I'll catch up with you. Anyways, we went full force and full faith that we were going to have this son, and we were going to get what we wanted and manifesting it. Well, we got what we wanted. We got a boy. He was born 9/4 of 2020 at 3 a.m. in the morning. His birth lasted probably about 4 hours. It was an incredible water birth. Everything went extremely well. Everybody was healthy at the end of the birth. Everybody was breathing. Everybody had a very high spirit and high hopes that this life was just about the most perfect thing that could come into this world. My wife wanted a tomato sandwich. We had leftover tomatoes from the tomato harvest that fall. And so I was like, okay, I'll go home and I'll make you a tomato sandwich. I'll be right back. My house is literally 1.5 miles down the road from the delivery clinic. So I get in my car, get the sandwiches done. I'm driving back. On my way back, I get a phone call. It's my wife. And she is just pretty much screaming in my ear that Killian stopped breathing. They're bringing the ambulance up. Helen's doing resuscitation right now. You need to hurry the hell up and get here. So at 3 a.m, obviously, I put the pedal to the metal all the way to the clinic. There's nobody in town going around anywhere.
And this was in Colorado City, right? Because
yes.
you were kind of having a natural childbirth.
Yes.
So you had left just a few minutes away, though, right?
Yeah. Just
The
to go to
town's
my
very
house
small.
right down the street. Yeah, very small town.
Colorado City, just so you
Very
guys know, is a teeny town. Maybe how many people live there? What's the population?
Right now, well, before max population, maybe 5,000, maybe. Yeah. That's when everybody was living in town.
What is it now, do you believe?
Now it's probably back to that population with all the new infrastructure and everybody moving in with all the schooling and everything. It's probably about that size again.
So you're living in Colorado City in your house, and you're having your second baby. Okay. Tomato sandwich.
So anyways, I go to get my wife this tomato sandwich. My house is literally 1.5 miles down the road, 2 miles down the road from the clinic. 3 a.m, there's nobody there. Go home, come back. So I'm on my way back. I get this phone call that Kellyan's not breathing. And I'm going, okay, like, what's going on? You know, Helen's resuscitating him. She's getting him going again. He's breathing. And then I hear the ambulance is coming. I'm just like, okay, well, it sounds like we're going down to St. George. What the heck's going on? You know, like, and I get up there and my wife's just like, I don't know what happened. I went down to feed him and he just started coughing and sputtering, and then he just quit. Like there was nothing. And then he started going blue like he was lifeless. And I'm just like, holy cow, you know, what the heck are we up against? What's going on? You know, like just birth stuff, you know, like he'll pull through, he'll be all right. We get down to the hospital, they do all these tests, and he's got jaundice. So they're like, your blood and her blood are not compatible, so it mixed with his blood. So he's got jaundice, so we're going to have to put the billy ribbon blankets on him. I'm like, okay, that doesn't sound like that's too big of a thing. Like, she's like, it's pretty serious, but it's not, you know. With these blankets, it'll pass, and he'll get through it, and everything will be okay. So we stay in the hospital, like, probably 2 days after he's born with those blankets on him, just monitoring him. And at this time, they had no idea that he had 2 collapsed lungs partially, that he had his genetic problems. We had no idea any of this was going on. We just thought it was, jaundice, okay, mine and her blood mixed during the birth between him, however that works, the A chromosome and the B chromosome mixing at the wrong time causes jaundice. If those 2 blood strains cross, I'm like, okay, nothing's happening. We get him home. He's still on the blankets for the next couple weeks. Just monitor him really closely. We have oxygen for him at this point. We didn't know that he was silently aspirating every time he fed at this point either. So we're feeding him bottles and trying to get him to nurse, and he's doing okay. He's just doing natural stuff, but he didn't know he was doing it to himself, and we didn't know either that he had a swallowing difficulty. Everything he swallowed was going directly into his lungs. And one morning early, I don't know if it was just her gut feeling, just waking up because there's something wrong or something. All of a sudden I get woke up, Andrew, he's not breathing. I'm just, obviously I'm popping out of bed. He's probably 1.5 months old now, freaking out like, what the heck is going on, And at this point in time, I hadn't been trained in CPR yet for an infant, but I did know about CPR a little bit because I've had some training before on adults. So I'm just like, the heck with it. He ain't breathing. We got to get some oxygen moving. His brain ain't going to last too much longer looking this color. So I just start CPR, start doing mouth to mouth the best I can, start doing chest compressions. She calls the ambulance. This is round 1. We get down to the hospital. Yeah, they do a couple chest x-rays, and they're going, dude, your kid's lungs are full of fluid. like, he's got pneumonia or something. Like, he hasn't had a cough. There's nothing going on. Like, there's no colds. Like, your kid's lungs are full, and that's why he quit breathing. He doesn't have any more room for air. So we're going to have to put him on a CPAP, get him opened up, and get his lungs, fully formed before he can go back to the hospital. Because I guess when he's in mom's womb, he was so folded in half the whole time, because Alec has kind of a small uterus, that the bottom half of his lungs weren't developed all the way. So when he came out of mom, he was only able to consume half the oxygen that he needed, and then he had his genetic problems on top of that, which made it so he couldn't swallow. I think I should get to this genetic thing here. So we have this genetically disabled son of mine that his genetic deformality is called Weil-Wacker-Wolff syndrome. And it is a disease. Well, it's not really a disease. It's just a deformality of genetics where it never got built to where the neurons between your brain and your body connection on telling you what to do are not there to fire. So every time you go to say, put a piece of food in my mouth or just to swallow my saliva, that connection is not there in his mind, so he cannot do that. And he is one out of 5 families in the whole world that we have knowledge of that have this genetic deformality or disease. And there's not a lot of knowledge of it, so a lot of doctors don't even know where to begin with it with him. It's so rare. So he's a 1 in a billion baby on what he has and what we are up against with his life on continuing things that might pop up with his life as he grows. We have no idea if, what the road's going to offer. We can expect and hope for the best and think of the best, but we have no exact knowledge on what's going to happen. So far, I've had to resuscitate him 6 times personally in my life to get him to come back to breathing on his own. And that's me either finding him completely lifeless, laying there on the bed, or my wife shouting at me that he's not breathing and we need to start CPR. But let me just backtrack a little bit there. After that first incident with CPR, I went in, both me and my wife got trained into infant CPR. We got us a baby mannequin doll. We still have it to this day, and we work on it every now and again just to practice and make sure we got things going right. One time, I think it was on number 5, the police officer from Mojave County actually showed up very fast at our place. He must have been down the street when the call got called in or something. Because every time in Arizona, if there's a first responder, normally a marshal, if he's in the area, will show up at your doorstep first before the ambulance ever gets there. So an officer's knocking on your door. Hey, is everything okay? What can I do to help? Is there anything he can do to kind of help the situation or guide things? So this time I'm number 5. He's on the floor, and it's probably about 30 chest compressions in and way too long. Like, this is the point where things are going gray. They're not blue anymore. And you know that shit's just shutting off oxygen-wise. You're going to lose brain matter. You're going to be in big trouble if you don't get going. And I'm getting to the point where my adrenaline's so peaked that I got off rhythm on my chest compressions. And the officer was like, hey, you're off. Can I take over? And I'm just like, it was an instinct thing. Like, sure, go ahead. I don't know who you are. I don't know what's going on. Something's off. Something different is happening. It's just an instinct thing. And he bends down and starts doing rhythmic chest compressions the correct way and doing breaths of air. And I think about second breath of air and 10 more chest compressions in, he comes popping up. And still to this very day, even if I see that officer, I thank him. because he saved my son's life. So whatever y'all thinking out there that police officers don't save lives, I watched it personally. There are some very, very excellent law enforcement people out there they will give their life to help another person. Don't ever think about it. And the concept today, a lot of people think that they're not out there to help us. We need to change our thinking, because that's all they're there for.
Yeah, for sure. They show up when you're in need, without a doubt.
Somehow, that way, that time,
They do.
that guy was there.
They're pretty incredible human beings.
But
Yeah, that's crazy.
I don't know if point like.
Yeah, officers are pretty incredible human beings, without a doubt, and not paid very well, and they're literally put their life at risk.
Yeah.
They walk into some scary situations. I've seen a couple for myself. Here's a thought I have on Killian. So, and I don't know if we completely have let the listeners know, but this adorable little guy has been in and out of the hospital for 3 years.
Yeah.
He is bedridden. He can't chew. He can't swallow. He has a feeding tube.
Yes.
He has a little tube in his mouth, or what's the little? You guys are always draining the saliva.
Yeah,
He can't even swallow his saliva in his mouth. So either Andrew or his wife have to stick right there with him all day long, and they're always suctioning, like when you go to the dentist and they pull that saliva out of your mouth. You guys are doing
Same
that
thing.
24/7, right?
I've done it myself personally with his suction machine. It feels just like the dentist.
Yeah.
Exactly what it
It's
is.
just like they're always sucking the saliva out because he doesn't have the ability to swallow.
Yeah.
He doesn't speak. He can't barely move his limbs, right? Like he's got a little bit of movement in his hands and feet, barely.
He's getting a lot wigglier
Is he?
in his 3rd year. Oh, yeah.
Starting to move a little more.
Oh, yeah. He pulls the dolphin where he uses his ab muscles, and he.
Yeah. So he is moving a little bit, but he's basically in bed,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. If me or mom ain't hauling him around or holding him, he's laying in bed.
Yeah, you pick him up, hold him. Obviously, you're telling us today you shower with him, and even if he gets a little water in his mouth when he showers, he's in trouble because he can't get rid of the water that sneaked into his mouth while he's taking a shower, and you have to suction that out of his mouth too.
No, those are the big ones, because we're both all naked and we're trying to shower him, and mom has to run and grab the suction machine from the bedroom into the bathroom and suck him out all in a space of about 30 seconds.
And when so I've been to their house in Colorado Springs. That was 4 or 5 years ago, but I've seen them at the hospital a couple times up at Primary Children's, and let's give Primary Children's some kudos. Andrew's been to a bunch of hospitals. How many visits has Killian had in 3 years at a hospital? I mean, how many times it's ambulance at least, what?
So right now on my plate that I still owe for is we have 3 live flights, multiple ambulance rides to St. George. Yeah, you could say a dozen times he's been in the ambulance, and 3 or 4 times been live flighted up here to primaries, and once to Phoenix.
Yeah. I know when we saw you when he was back there, because there was blood in his stomach 5 or 6 months ago, and so they could not figure out what was wrong, so they get him up to Primary Children's. His esophagus was full of ulcers and had literally deteriorated his esophagus. It was lacerated.
Yes.
And so he was bleeding
internally,
and the blood was going into his gut. And you guys found blood somehow.
Yeah, through his stoma, when we call a drawback and stomach tube, and we stick a syringe in it and we pull back to see what the colors of fluids look like in his stomach, to keep a check on it. And if you get coffee ground type stuff, that means blood in the stomach. And we pulled back a substantial amount of that, and we knew something that was going on and it wasn't right. So we take him down to St. George, and they do a blood test, and they say his iron levels are so low that it's dangerous. They're going to start a blood infusion, and that he's bleeding somewhere from the internal, and they don't know where, so they're going to ship him up to Salt Lake to do a bunch of x-rays and get a scope on his throat and put him under, and yeah, they did the scope, found that, and then they had to come up with a plan on how to fix that so it would quit deteriorating his esophagus, so he'd quit bleeding internally. So we ended up doing a Nissen wrap, which is they tie the top of your stomach, the tube, where it loops around, they tie it with a mesh tighter around the sphincter, so stomach acid and fluids can't come up your esophagus and give you heartburn, etc., that type of stuff.
Yeah.
And so before he could even have that operation done, since he was already so badly damaged internally, they had to put him on a saliva gland secretion, pretty much decretion type thing. Like it pretty much doesn't let you spit out any saliva. And so they put him on that drug for probably a week and a half, and they let his esophagus heal, and we continued on with the surgeries, and he got his tummy button tube done that same time when he was under. So it was 2 surgeries in one. And that was a really, I think, kind of a big landmark in Kellyan's life, because he'd been struggling so long with choking and gagging and actually holding down food into his stomach that it was becoming more and more of a problem as the years gone on. As he got older, his body wasn't able to contain the nutrients he needed for him to grow. So he's literally becoming more of a vegetable state as the years went by, that we didn't have that stomach tube in his tummy button to feed him whatever we needed to be feeding him to keep him up to weight and up to, all his nutrition levels. So as soon as that was done and that bleeding was stopped, the kid started taking off like a rocket. A few months there of just kind of overcoming the surgery and him getting used to his body in his own way. But 6 months later down the road to this day, I mean, he doesn't choke as much as he used to. He doesn't bleed internally anymore. And he's taking licks of food. He can't swallow it or chew it, but he licks it. He loves food. He wants everybody's food, but he cannot eat it. He'll love to taste it. He can't eat it. And if he does get a crumb down on it, well, it's choking for the next half hour, but hey, we had our fun with the donut, right?
Yeah.
The small things in life that matter. Just a lick of a sister's waffle with syrup on it, dude, is that kid's highlight.
Really?
It is his life to just have those small things that we take so for granted, of it just being picked up and held and loved, or being even talked to nicely and smiled at, or even sit down for a second and be playful or joyful with another person, or to watch another person's pupils completely dilate when they taste a piece of food that's just so yummy to them because they never get it, and it's just like all these small things in life that matter so much. And I don't think anybody can really see that as a blessing in life until they have something, either it's taken from them and they take it for granted, or they have something that knocks on their head every day this is special. This world, just to be able to breathe, eat, talk, swallow, get on your feet every day and say I love you, is just it's a blessing. Yeah. It's an amazing, your body is 1,000,000,000 to 1 how it works. If you don't believe that, look at genetics.
Yeah. You bring up a really good point there, Andrew, is, it's like slowing down enough to smell the roses. We rode bikes today, and he was saying, I handed him a little snack bar on our bike ride, and he said, Brandy, how fortunate we are to be able to chew and swallow. I don't consider that very often. I do try to slow down and smell the roses, but I mean, that hit me like a ton of bricks. We're up here riding bikes. We're drinking water. We had a little snack. We're conversing, the 4 or 5 of us, and Killian likely will never do any of those things. It's just not in his cards. And to be able to taste syrup, have a taste of a water, maybe a soda, maybe a bite of spaghetti or a hamburger, like those things that young man will never experience, likely. And when you think your life's hard, consider Killian. I mean, that's a battle right there. I know when I saw you guys, Andrew, 5 or 6 months ago, and I was watching you and your lovely wife, especially your wife, we had some real, good little conversation and a hug, but she literally probably hasn't slept in when I'd saw her in 2.5 years.
Yeah.
Likely you too. I know you get a little more break, I think you said, than she does.
I do.
Because you get to go to work and you got to have function and you got to, make some money so you can cover your bills. But these two literally haven't slept in, basically when I saw them 6 months ago, they said they're doing a little better, but haven't slept in like 2.5 years. He's on a monitor and the monitor beeps all the time when he stops breathing or he stops choking. And it happens like every hour or two, typically in an evening.
Yeah. If he's not feeling up to par, he's got a little cold or anything like that, definitely. The foot monitor's on him, and he'll dip down into the, his oxygen levels will go down to 88, 87, and the monitor will go off, and you'll be up, putting oxygen on him, turning him, sucking him out, making sure he's breathing good, and then go back to bed for a couple hours.
So they've been doing that for 3 years. They don't have an assistant. They don't have hospice because they can't afford it. Arizona, which is where Colorado City, doesn't offer any type of health care in the position that they're in.
Yeah, how far up we are.
They've been in and out of hospitals for 3 years. I assume, does Primary Children charge you when you go there?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
So you got to pay all those
bill.
You got to pay those bills.
Yeah.
Every time you go there, you got to cover those bills.
I have a nice 100 change bill on my plate with Intermountain. Yeah.
So you have over $100,000 that you still owe to this day that you just pay on a monthly basis or when you get money or what?
Yeah. When I can, how I can, yeah.
$100,000.
I don't look at that. That number was whatever.
Jeez.
Literally.
And any insurance at all?
Yeah.
Like some coverage, right?
Insurance is covered.
Portion of it.
Quite a bit of it, actually.
Really?
Oh, yeah. It was
You're
up to
probably
like
up in-
$300,000 or plus before insurance started buying chunks out of it, especially with life flights. Every time you go on a life flight, that's $20,000.
And that's out of your pocket.
That's out of your pocket.
Insurance doesn't cover any
Doesn't
of
cover
that.
that. And just the ambulance ride to get that life flight's $8,000.
Oh, my goodness.
Dude, this medical in this country is absolutely absurd. And anybody that goes to the hospital and then has bills to pay later, I'm telling you right here, right now, those people can't pay those bills. Whatever you're thinking that they might be able to pay those bills in their lifetime, dude, who has $100,000 if they're even a mid-class working person with a couple kids? Give me a break. Most people's loans aren't even that much, their house loan maybe.
Yeah.
Like who has that kind of money? And then I started putting perspective to what is money. It's a stupid number and an idea that people come up with to make a reality.
Yeah, it's... Anyways, now you guys know
point.
why I said, hey, Andrew could use some donations, and that's not the reason for this podcast, but my goodness, if you guys want to give your 10% somewhere where it's really, really in need, I know a family, and please reach out. You guys know where to find me. Email, reach out at my websites, themindsgyms.com or whatever, but anyways, they could honestly benefit from your charity. So at the hospital anyways, just watching you guys, like your wife was exhausted.
Oh yeah,
and like, it's just her and your 2 kids and you. They don't have a lot of community. There's no therapy. It's just like she's just in this big black hole, just like literally holding on for dear life. And I'm sure your guys' thoughts and thinking and the anxiety and the depression and what's this whole life, what's really going on here? Is it worth hanging on? I know you have mentioned that the thoughts come in is like, why are we even hanging on? This is so difficult and so hard.
Yeah.
And I have a couple questions. Like, for one, the Killian, like I look at that kid and how sweet and how angelic he is, and I know it's changed your life, but the need for him, like what is it that keeps you guys engaged and sleepless? What is it about like keeping this young man alive on this planet? Like, explain that to me. Like I just watch you guys and you're exhausted. So like I want to, and as a parent, I don't know what I would do. I mean, of course it's your kid. You want him to live and survive and prosper, but you've got this little guy that can't even barely function or move. Like what's going on there, and explain that to me. I mean, I have no idea. I've never been in your shoes. I can't imagine. That's got to be the hardest decision in the world.
Good point, Brandon. I've done some really, really deep thinking, and I've also gotten some instruction from my mentors on how to handle this this exact situation.
So, what is it that keeps you and your wife going and being able to hang in there and keep putting forth all of your energy to keep this little guy alive?
Yeah, it's been a real mind journey for me on that one, emotionally and physically, and mentally. I had to dig real deep what the meaning of life was and what the purpose of it for another human being is for another human being on this earth, as just two people trying to live. And I got digging into the quotes of Earl Nightingale, and he's like, the purpose on this earth is to be of service. When we're of service to our fellow man, giving them a product or a need or a service for something, we have a purpose as humans. And that is what keeps us going. When we have a purpose and a reason to keep going, humans don't stop. So my purpose was that I came up with my mind for my son was to be of service for him every day that he is here on this earth. And when I do that, commit to it and do it emotionally without regret or shame or hatred or anything that why I'm doing this for my son, when I do that purpose and I help him with a loving heart and I give him every opportunity and everything in my brain can think of, that kid gives me in return the biggest love, the biggest smiles. He'll laugh with me. He's curious. He doesn't move or act like a normal person, but emotionally and intellectually with his mind, that kid is one of the most powerful human beings I've met on this planet. And I think it's because I've spent so much time and dedicated my purpose into serving that little boy. And that's what keeps me going on every day. If I wake up every morning and I say, my purpose today is to serve my family, and that's what makes me a good human being.
Wow.
That's, if I can hold on to that thought first thing in the morning, what is your purpose today? Drew, what are you doing today? I'm serving my son. I'm helping my wife. I'm doing something to help my family. That's what keeps me going every day. Whatever comes by, all the emotional negative thoughts of, Brandon mentioned it, you name it. With this type of kid, you get suicidal thoughts, you get runaway thoughts, you get opt-out thoughts, you could drink, you can do all the other stuff to try to wash away the worry, but at the end of the day, you're just going to come home. And who's going to be sitting there? Your family. What have you been doing to serve that family instead of be resentful and worrying about all the problems instead of just picking up your boots and going, what's the best thing I can do to help my family with love or need or anything they could possibly want to make them happy, because if they're happy and I'm serving them to make them happy, that makes me happy. That's purpose. It's being happy.
Well spoken. Well spoken, Andrew. Yeah, if you guys aren't listeners are out there paying attention, man, this young man, he's definitely moving my soul. It takes a lot sometimes to move me, but you're doing it. Like, I'm just in awe of your efforts and where you've come and what you're doing, and just how you keep going. I mean, this life can be difficult. We can get our heads and literally scare the hell out of ourselves. And I'm sure I can't imagine where your guys' thoughts go. And your sweet little wife sitting there just, I mean, she pretty much is by his side 24/7.
Yeah, she is.
I mean, she doesn't leave the house. She doesn't vacation. She doesn't go anywhere. She doesn't hang out with her friends. She is in lockdown.
Pretty much
24/7.
You could say she's lost all that. Yeah. She don't have a lot of friends that come around anymore.
Yeah.
Any friends that she had before Kelly, and all kind of just left her because of him, you know.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. It's just the awkwardness of having or maybe that she just couldn't pay attention to them and had to pay attention to Kelly all the time, and that's what drove home, and that's why they quit coming around. I don't, we
only have so much capacity, right? And I mean, she's given all she's got to that young little guy. And
she has a huge heart and soul, and she's my queen, and I don't know anybody else that could do it but her. Literally, in my mind, like I know a lot of strong nurses and people out there, but hey, give them 3 years with Kelly, and I challenge anybody.
Yeah,
I don't care who you are.
And the nurses are working 3 or 4 days a week. She's working 24/7, 365 days a year.
This is all day long,
and going without very, very, very little sleep in the last 3 years, and interrupted sleep. That's 5, 6, 7 times a night. You know, I mean, imagine you have a little baby and they're up for 6 or 8 months or a year, and they're just exhausted. Mom, dad's exhausted, but you guys been dealing with this for 3 years, and likely several more. Hello, listener. Thank you for listening to part 1 of Andrew Ream's podcast. This one went a little long, so we had to break it up into 2 separate podcasts. I really do appreciate you guys listening, and consider this today. Who would you be without that negative thought that's been spinning in your mind today? Really sit in that. Who would you be without that thought? Thanks again for listening, and make sure and check out Andrew Ream's Part 2 podcast. It's an incredible story. Thanks again, guys. Have a beautiful day. Peace.